Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So today is the 7th day of Ramadan in 1443 Hijrah, and this is the 7th short reminder on the subject of Tawheed, the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. In yesterday's short reminder, we looked at 10 or so points which collectively they indicate the obligation to be concerned with the affair of Tawheed. And in today's lesson, we are going to mention another point, and this point is that Tawheed is the very first obligation upon a person, and it is also the last obligation upon a person, right? So this is the belief, this is the position of the people of the Sunnah, Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and it is a matter which is agreed upon by the Salaf, that the very first obligation upon the mukallaf, upon the one who is, the one who is obligated to respond to the message of Allah Azza wa Jal, that the first obligation is the shahadatan, right? To declare the two shahadas. And the first shahada is obviously, it is the testification to the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. So this is the first obligation. So this is the point that we are going to discuss today, inshallah ta'ala, through the statements of the scholars. And so we start first of all with the verse in the Quran, Surah An-Nahl, Surah 16, verse 36. وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. That we have indeed sent or raised in every nation a messenger, saying or commanding that you should worship Allah and avoid false deities. So since this is the first command given by the messengers, then the first obligation therefore is to attest to that, to affirm that, and to accept that, and to indeed to single out Allah in worship. And also from the evidences that indicate that Tawheed is the first obligation is the fact that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he sent Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu anhu to the Yemen, he said to him, فَلْيَكُنْ أَوَّلَ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ إِلَى أَنْ يُوَحِّدُوا اللَّهَ تَعَالَى. Let the first thing that you call them to be that they single out Allah the Exalted, meaning they single out Allah the Exalted in Tawheed, in worship. So these are just two texts. There are many texts from the Quran and from the Sunnah. We know that all of the messengers, when they were sent to their people, they said, Ya qawmi ibudullah ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh. O my people, worship Allah. Worship Allah. You have no other deity besides Him. And this is the first thing that they began with. So since this is the first command, and likewise we see it at the beginning of the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nasu ubudullah, u'budu rabbakum, Ya ayyuhan nasu u'budu rabbakum, O mankind, worship your Lord. Worship your Lord who created you and who created those before you. And this is the first command to come in the Quran. And so therefore the first obligation is Tawheed, and to single out Allah Azza wa Jal in worship. For this reason, we see Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, Inna salaf wal a'imma muttafiquna ala anna awwala ma yu'maru bihi al-ibad ash-shahadatan. Indeed, the Salaf and the leading scholars are all agreed that the very first thing that the servants are commanded with is the shahadatan, is to make the two testifications of Iman. Yeah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. So, and then Ibn Taymiyyah also says, وَمُتَّفِقُونَ على أن من فعل ذلك قبل البلوغ لم يؤمر بتجديد ذلك عقب البلوغ. He said that they are also united, the Salaf and the scholars are also united, that whoever says that, whoever does that, meaning declares the Shahadatan, before he reaches maturity, before he reaches bulugh, then he is not commanded to repeat it again during bulugh. Right? So meaning that if someone who hasn't yet reached the age of maturity, or the puberty or maturity, bulugh, maturity, and he has already said Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah before that, then his entrance into Islam is obviously acknowledged and valid. He is not then commanded to repeat it when he reaches bulugh, or any time after bulugh. Right? So the scholars of the Muslims, the Salaf, they are agreed upon this. Likewise, we see Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, فَالتَّوْحِيد أول ما يدخل به في الإسلام وآخر ما يخرج به من الدنيا. Tawheed is the very first thing by which a person enters into Islam, and it is the last thing, meaning it is the last thing that a believer ought, or the servant, the servants of Allah, that they ought to leave the world upon. Right? That they leave the world upon Tawheed. So they enter Islam with Tawheed. It's the first thing they enter Islam with, and it is the last thing by which they depart the dunya. Likewise, Al-Imam Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala, the Mufassir, he said, أول واجب على المكلفين. The very first obligation upon the people, أن يعلموا أنه لا إله إلا الله, is for them to know that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, وحده لا شريك له. None has the right to be worshipped except Allah alone, without any partners. And likewise, Al-Imam Sulaiman bin Abdullah, from the descendants, the offspring of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, التوحيد هو أول واجب على المكلف وآخر واجب وهو أول ما يدخل به في الإسلام وآخر ما يخرج به من الدنيا. Similar, Tawheed is the very first obligation, and it is the last obligation likewise, and it is the first thing by which a person enters into Islam, and it is the last thing by which a person leaves the world. Meaning, when a person dies, what is it that he says? He says the kalima, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. When he dies, that's the last thing that he says. Likewise, we see the statement of Shaykh al-Imam Abdul Aziz ibn Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. He says, فَالْعِبَادَةُ حَقُّ اللَّهِ. Worship is the right of Allah. لَا يُعْبَدُ مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدٌ. No one is worshipped alongside Allah. لا ملك ولا نبي ولا ولي ولا غير ذلك. Neither an angel, nor a prophet, nor a wali, like a righteous person, nor besides that. None of these are worthy of worship alongside Allah. And then he says, وَالْوَاجِبُ عَلَى جَمِيعِ الْمُكَلَّفِينَ. It is obligatory upon all of the people, أَن يَكُونَ اهتمامهم بهذا الأمر أعظم اهتمام. That it is obligatory that their concern with this affair of Tawheed, that it is the greatest of concern. لأن التوحيد, because Tawheed هو أصل الدين وأساس الملة, it is the foundation of the religion, it is the foundation of the religion again. وهو أعظم واجب وأهم واجب. It is the greatest obligation and the most important obligation. وَلِأَنَّ الشِّرْكَ, and also because الشِّرْكَ هُوَ أَعْظَمُ الذُّنُوبِ وَأَكْبَرُ الْجَرَائِمِ. Because shirk, the opposite, is the greatest of sins, and it is the greatest of crimes. فَوَجَبَ أن يكون اهتمام المسلمين واهتمام طلاب العلم والعلماء بهذا الأمر أعظم من كل اهتمام وأولى من كل أمر. So therefore it is obligatory that the concern of the Muslims, the concern of the students of knowledge and the scholars, that their concern with this affair is greater than every other concern, and that it is more worthy and more befitting than every other affair. And likewise, the Shaykh Al-Allama Hafiz Al-Hakami rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his poetry, in Ma'arij al-Qubul, he said, أول واجب على العبيد معرفة الرحمن بالتوحيد, which means the very first obligation upon the servants is to know Ar-Rahman through Tawheed. To know Ar-Rahman through Tawheed. Likewise, the Shaykh Al-Allama Salih Al-Fawzan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he said, أول واجب على العبيد أول واجب على العبيد عبادة الله. The very first obligation upon the servants is to worship Allah. That is the first obligation. أما معرفته, as for knowing Allah, فإنهم يعرفونه بالفطرة والعقول والأدلة الكونية والأدلة القرآنية. As for having knowledge of Allah, how do we arrive at knowledge of Allah? Then Allah is known by way of the fitrah, meaning it is something innate, it is something original and innate and natural. And also by al-uqul, by the intellects, by reasoning. And also by wal-adillatil kawniyah, by the signs that are present in Allah's creation. And likewise wal-adillatil qur'aniyah, and likewise the signs in the Quran, which Allah indicates by way of arguments and evidences. So then the Shaykh continues, Shaykh Al-Fawzan, he then says, وَلِهَذَا أَوَّلَ مَا يُؤْمَرُ بِهِ الصَّغِيرُ الصَّلَاةِ. This is why the very first thing that a young child is commanded with is the prayer. Right? The prayer. As the Messenger said, مُرُّوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ بِالصَّلَاةِ لِسَبْعٍ وَاضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا لِأَشْرٍ وَفَرَّقُوا بَيْنَهُمْ فِي الْمَدَاجِعِ. Command your children with the prayer at the age of 7 and admonish them, discipline them over it at the age of 10 and separate them in their beds. So here the Messenger of Allah, what was the first thing he said? He said, command your children with the prayer at the age of 7. He did not say, as Shaykh Al-Fawzan says, وَلَمْ يَقُلْ عَرِّفُوهُمْ بِاللَّهِ. He didn't say, acquaint them with Allah. He didn't say, direct them to come to knowledge about Allah. Because, as the Shaykh says, لِأَنَّهُمْ يَعْرِفُونَ ذَلِكَ بِفِطْرَتِهِمْ. Because they already know that by way of their fitrah. Because لأن معرفة الله عز وجل معلومة بالفطرة. Because the knowledge of Allah, the acquaintance with Allah, is already known by way of the fitrah. So therefore, because this is already ingrained in the fitrah, the first obligation therefore is not to try and prove the universe had a beginning or to prove Allah exists. The first obligation that a child or that any person is informed with is to single out Allah in worship. So the Shaykh says, فَأَوَّلُ وَاجِبٍ عَلَى الْعَبِيدِ عِبَادَةُ اللَّهِ. The very first obligation upon the servants is to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. وَالْكَافِرْ حِينَمَا يُسْلِمْ يُؤْمَرُ بِالشَّهَادَتَيْنِ شَهَادَةُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَأَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. And even a disbeliever, the Shaykh says that when he becomes a Muslim, what is he commanded with? He is commanded with the shahadatain, to say I testify that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Then the Shaykh says, وَلَا يُؤْمَرْ بأن ينظر في الكون ويستدل على وجود الله كما يقولون. He says, the person is not commanded to start now reflect and look in the creation and develop or devise or think of an evidence for Allah's existence. This is what some people say. This is not necessary because Allah's existence is already known in the fitrah. No one rejects this, right? So this is why all of the messengers, they said to the people, they began by saying, U'budullah, worship Allah. Why? The Shaykh says, لِأَنَّهُمْ يَعْرِفُونَ اللَّهَ بِفِطَرِهِمْ. They already know Allah by way of the fitrah. And that's why you do not find in the Quran the messengers beginning by saying, Ya qawm i'rafullah. Ya qawm i'rafullah. O my people, know Allah. Have knowledge of Allah. Because they already know, as the Shaykh says, لِأَنَّهُمْ يَعْرِفُونَ أَنَّ لَهُمْ رَبًّا. They already know that they have a Lord. ولكنهم لم يعبدوه. However, they did not single him out in worship. فَيَأْمُرُهُمْ بِعِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ هَذَا هُوَ الصَّوَابِ. So therefore they are commanded to worship Allah, and this is what is correct. Then the Shaykh continues, Shaykh al-Fawzan, and he says, أما علماء الكلام فيقولون أول واجب على العبد هو النظر. So the Shaykh then says, as for the people of Kalam, they say that the very first obligation upon the servant is another. What does this mean? It means that you have to now start looking and inspecting, and you have to now start to find an evidence, an intellectual evidence, a rational evidence to prove the existence of a Lord, to prove that the universe had a beginning. As the Shaykh says, they claim ينظر في الأدلة لإثبات الرب سبحانه وتعالى ثم بعد ذلك إذا نظر في الأدلة وعرف الرب ووجوده يعبده. So basically what they are saying, and these are the people of Kalam, like the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, the Ash'ariyah, they say that the first obligation upon a person is an-nadhar wal-istidlal. An-nadhar wal-istidlal, which means that the first obligation is you've got to start looking around you, looking at the signs, and you've got to somehow devise and develop a convincing proof, a rational proof, to show that the universe had a beginning, and therefore it is proof for the existence of a creator. This is your first obligation. And some of them, obviously they say this is the first obligation, and some of them even go further than this, and they say that the first obligation is to start from the position of doubt, of shak, right? So meaning that you've got to start essentially disbelieving in everything, rejecting all the knowledge that you have, that which is fitri, daruri, right? And you assume the position of doubt. So you say, well, I don't know whether there is a creator or there is a creator, right? So I'm starting from the position of doubt, of shak. And so from this point onwards, I'm now going to find or develop or devise an evidence that the universe had a beginning and therefore has a creator. And once I have convinced myself that there is a creator, then I know that my iman is upon a solid foundation. It is valid iman. In other words, the people of Kalam, the people of Ilm al-Kalam, what they are basically saying, they essentially deny that al-fitra, the fitra, is a valid basis for iman. Right? Because the fitra, Allah's existence, Allah's rububiyyah, is already known in the fitra. And because of that, the first thing that a person, the first obligation is simply to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. to say La ilaha illallah, and to single out worship. And so this is the difference between the people of the Sunnah who are agreed, and likewise the Salaf are agreed, that the first obligation is to simply say the Shahadatan and to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Why? Because knowledge of Allah is fitri, it is daruri, it is something that's original, it's innate, it's intuitive, it is something that, a child is kind of inborn, it's within a child. They already know that this creation has a creator by necessity. So the only thing they need to do is to single out Allah in worship. Right? Whereas the people of Kalam, to them, they say that no, you have to make reason to be the basis. And so they discount the fitrah. And so they obligate upon every person, even some of them go to the extremes. Some of them from the people of Kalam, they say that a child who reaches the age of puberty or maturity, the age of majority, and who then has the means and the ability to rationally prove the existence of a creator, but he does not do so, and then he dies, then he is not buried with the Muslims, rather he is buried with the non-Muslims. Essentially, they are making takfir of the person who reaches the age of maturity, and then he doesn't convince himself by rational arguments, that the universe has a maker and a creator, right? So some of them went to this extreme, and essentially all they are doing, they are opposing the Quran, they are opposing the Sunnah, and they are actually encouraging doubt, right, in the hearts of the people. Whereas what we know is that the messengers, they simply ordered their people to single out Allah in worship, because the affair of Allah's rububiyyah is already, it's fitri, it is daruri, it is known, it is ingrained, it is intuitive, right? It's in the fitrah, and so that's the first obligation that they would command the people with. So this, as the Shaykh finishes, Shaykh al-Fawzan, he says, نقول هذا تحصيل حاصل الخلق يعرفون الله بالفطرة وبالأدلة الكونية والأدلة القرآنية. The Shaykh says, look, this is something that's already present. The creation know Allah already by way of the fitrah, and they also know Him by way of the signs in the creation and by evidences from the Quran. So this is today's reminder. Today's reminder to show the importance of Tawheed is to point out that it is the very first obligation upon the servant. The very first obligation. This is the first obligation. The first obligation isn't to rationally prove there is a creator and to convince yourself with rational arguments, or to start off with the position of doubt. This is the way of the people of Kalam. And as Ibn Taymiyyah said, إن السلف والأئمة متفقون على أن أول ما يؤمر به العباد الشهادتان. Right? So the first thing that every person is commanded with is simply iman in Allah, and to establish, to make the shahadatan, and to establish the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. So this is today's reminder. It is centered on the first, what is the first obligation? If someone asks you the question, what is the very first obligation upon the servants of Allah? Then you say it is the shahadatan. The shahadatan. That is the very first obligation. It is to testify that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and that Muhammad is His messenger. And this is the very first obligation. And this is what the Salaf are agreed upon, and the Imma. So with that, we'll conclude today's reminder, and inshallah we will continue tomorrow bi'idhnillahi. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.